Contents of parts 8 and 9. Section 1. Analyzing the wisdom behind mut'ah marriage and the harms that have resulted from banning it. Section 2. Explaining the many types of temporary marriages invented by the Sunnis in order to replace the natural need of society for mut'ah marriage. For example, Misyar, Misyaf, misfar, zawaj friend, zawaj biniyat al-talaq, etc. Section 3. Different possible applications of mut'ah marriage. Section 4. Common misconceptions about mut'ah marriage. Section 5. Instructions on how to perform a mut'ah marriage. Section 1. Analyzing the wisdom behind mut'ah marriage and the harms that have resulted from banning it. Allah Almighty, with His infinite wisdom, has sanctioned the institution of temporary marriage due to His accurate knowledge of society's needs. He has installed a full marriage system to organize the relationships between the two genders and hence organize the family life. Temporary marriage is one part of this full marriage system and is a solution for society. The disablement of any part of the marriage system would definitely give rise to many unlawful alternatives to replace the society's natural need for that lawful institution. These unlawful alternatives result in the destruction of the marriage system which governs the family unit, that is essentially the cell of the society. If the cell is destroyed, then the whole fabric of the society gets destroyed, and this is what we witness today. Prohibiting what Allah made lawful is just as bad as legalizing what He has made unlawful. Both cases constitute tampering with the religion and challenging God's infinite wisdom. Psychologists and criminologists are unanimous that the poverty and lacking are the root causes of all evils in the society. The prohibition of the lawful institutions actually institutes for lacking, creating deprivation, desperation and poverty, the very problems that religion has come to combat and eradicate. Imam Ali said, if Umar did not forbid mut'ah, then no one would have committed fornication except the very evil. And he also said, no one would have committed fornication except very few people. Each time one door of halal is closed, many doors of haram are opened as a result of that closure. This phenomena has been repeatedly demonstrated in the societies throughout history. Whenever people prohibited an institution that God has made lawful, the society automatically replaced it with many unlawful and destructive alternatives. For example, the Catholic priests who prohibited marriage on themselves were struck with an enormous chain of scandals related to sexual deviation. Their natural human need of marriage and sexuality was replaced with various forms of sexual deviations, including fornication, homosexuality, and child molestation, let alone the dangerous complexes that they develop as a result of the self-imposed deprivation and abstinence. Another example of this phenomena is the prohibition of the lawful polygyny, in which religion has sanctioned, encouraged, and even obliged in many different situations. The so-called monogamy system which is enforced today, even though labeled as monogamy, in reality it is anything but monogamy. The lawful polygyny, which is a natural need of society, was automatically replaced with extramarital affairs, female prostitution, and many other forms of sexual deviations. Married men constitute the majority of the customers of the global female prostitution market. Some statistics showed that 50% of married men end up committing adultery, and this is not even including those of them who intended to do so but actually failed to do it. Nor does it include those of them who fell into lower forms of sexual deviations other than what could be defined as adultery. This phenomena, where destructive alternatives replace the banned lawful institutions, actually applies to the bans placed on early marriage and temporary marriage as well. The prohibition of early and temporary marriage has resulted in alarming disasters amongst the youth and adult population. The youth reach their biological age of marriage at puberty. However, they are legally and socially denied the right to marriage for many long years after their puberty and biological readiness for marriage. In this long period, they are very likely to fall into various forms of emotional and sexual sins and develop complexes resulting from the deprivation, desperation, and prohibition that they face during that period. For example, statistics show that an alarming 43% of the Muslim youth end up fornicating before marriage. This is only one example of the many harmful consequences resulting from prohibiting the lawful institution of temporary marriage. There are dozens of other harmful consequences, some of which we will discuss later. Section 2. Sunni temporary marriages invented to replace mut'ah. The mut'ah marriage solution is totally absent from many societies, and particularly the Sunni societies who have prohibited this type of marriage. Their prohibition of it resulted in the invention of numerous types of temporary marriages to replace the society's natural need for it. Some examples of these marriages which were invented to replace the sunnah of mut'ah marriage are as follows: الزواج بنية الطلاق، زواج المصياف،
زواج عرفي، زواج مسيار، زواج misfar، زواج فرنس، زواج وزواج وزواج. إذا كانت الحاجة أم الاختراع في العلم، فما الذي أدى إلى طرح كل هذه الصيغ من الزواج في الواقع؟
Not only that most of these invented marriages have no reference whatsoever in the Qur'an or the Sunnah, but many of them include transgression within their terms and conditions. We will go through these marriages and highlight the problematic elements involved in each of them, if any exists. The first one is zawaj biniyat al-talaq, which means marriage with the intention of divorce. This is a permanent marriage which is made temporary by using divorce to terminate the contract after a specified period of time. However, the intention of divorce must be kept hidden from the wife. This marriage was allowed by Abdul Aziz bin Baz, the former Grand Mufti of Saudi Arabia and the global Salafi movement. Here is the fatwa on his official website. The question was asked: I'm a Syrian citizen who is working in Saudi Arabia in Riyadh, and I want to do marriage with the intention of divorce. What is the Islamic rule for this? I want to divorce when I finish the work and then travel. The answer: there is a difference on this issue, but the majority say that it is permissible, because the intention is only in his heart, and there is no condition made with the wife or her family, so it would not be regarded as mut'ah. This is a legitimate marriage according to the majority of the scholars, and the fact that he intends to divorce in the future does not affect the legitimacy of the marriage. Divorce is allowed for him when he needs it, as long as he doesn't make it into a condition. If he makes a condition with the wife that he will divorce her after a specified period of time, then this would become the haram mut'ah. As long as the intention of divorce is only between himself and God, and there is no announcement of this condition, then this is right according to the majority of the scholars. This fatwa is also documented in Ibn Baz's book Masail al-Imam Ibn Baz, Dar ibn Hazm, the first group, page 185, questions 530 and 531. In question 531, they specifically ask him, doesn't marriage with the intention of divorce constitute cheating the woman? He answers, no. The second one is Misyar marriage, which means occasional visit marriage. It is derived from the word sayyara, which means to visit someone occasionally. In this marriage, usually a marital condition is made on the wife to give up her right to the compulsory sustenance by the husband, i.e. to forego her right to the compulsory nafaqah. Also, in the cases of polygyny, conditions are made on the wife to give up her right to the equal share of time and or other provisions. These marriages are usually done in secrecy and are of a temporary nature, as they get terminated by divorce after a specified period of time. Misyar is rampant in the Gulf countries and especially in Saudi Arabia, and there are many active matchmaker websites dedicated specifically to this type of marriage. One example of this is Misyar Online, as you can see here. It has thousands of active members as well as 170 different matchmakers and offices all over the countries of Saudi, Emirat, Qatar, Kuwait, Egypt, Turkey and Morocco. Another website is Misyar Online with a slightly different spelling. It shows 2.4 million people have visited the website, as you can see here. Another one is golfmisyar.com, as you can see here. This website says in one of its rules that it is dedicated for people from the Gulf only and that it is for Sunnis only, as you can see here. The third one is Zawaj friend marriage. Sheikh Abdul Majid al-Zandani, the head of the Assembly of the Islah Party in Yemen and the head of the Islamic Studies University, has called for the introduction of a new form of marriage with the name Zawaj friend to replace the girlfriend system in the West, which allows friendship and sexual intercourse. This marriage is mainly practiced by students and youth living in the West. Like Misyar, it can include secrecy and the condition to forgive the rights of sustenance. The fourth one is misfar marriage, which means the traveler's marriage, and is derived from the word safar, which means to travel. This is very similar to Misyar marriage in its conditions, but is more specific to the travelers. The fifth one is musyaf marriage, which means summer marriage. It is derived from the word sayf, which literally means summer. This marriage is a traveler's marriage conducted in the summer holidays, and it terminates at the end of the summer holiday by using divorce. This type of marriage is rampant in the Gulf. It is practiced by Arabian Gulf tourists when they visit other countries, like Yemen for example. This type of marriage also includes secrecy and conditions to forgive the compulsory rights of sustenance and equality, as it would be hard for a traveler to fulfill these requirements. The sixth one is urfi marriage, which is a religious marriage without the state documentation or the announcement to the public. This marriage is more common in Egypt, Jordan and the Sham, and the reason for its appearance is the poverty and unemployment. People can no longer afford the big wedding ceremonies and the setting up of new houses. Therefore, they resort to a low-profile marriage that doesn't involve all these complications. This marriage can also include the unlawful marital conditions to give up the rights of sustenance and equality. Otherwise, it would be lawful and has no problem, because secrecy in marriage is permissible in itself, as long as there is no breach of any Islamic laws resulting from that secrecy. The problems with these invented marriages. Many of these invented marriages actually involve haram components in their terms and conditions. They include components which are conflicting with the essence of the Islamic jurisprudence. For example, in the Zawaj biniyat al-talaq, the husband is required to conceal his intention to divorce the wife after a specified period of time. This constitutes leading on, which is essentially dishonesty and deception, and is absolutely forbidden by the school of Ahlul Bayt. In contrast to this, with mut'ah marriage, there is transparency and mutual agreement about the period of time, and no deception involved and no leading on. Also, in the case of mut'ah, the separation does not need to involve divorce, which is highly discouraged in Islam. This is because mut'ah simply ends with the expiry of the designated period, without having to terminate a permanent contract by divorce. Another example of haram conditions that could arise in the cases of misyar, misfar, misyaf, and even at times in the urfi marriage is when the husband makes a marital condition on the wife to give up her right to the compulsory nafaqah or her right to the equal share of time in the cases of polygyny. These marital conditions are rejected by the school of Ahlul Bayt and deemed invalid because the permanent wife's right to sustenance and equality is compulsory, and marital conditions cannot disable what is compulsory. Finally, another example of potential haram that could arise from these types of marriages is the hypocrisy and lies that could arise from the secrecy which is typically inherent in the nature of some of these marriages. Secrecy is allowed in itself because the announcement of marriage is only mustahab and not obligatory. However, the secrecy situation in most cases can lead to lies and hypocrisy, which are absolutely forbidden according to the school of Ahlul Bayt. Section 3. Possible applications of mut'ah marriage. Temporary marriage is not there to replace the important role of permanent marriage. It is not always an ambition, but rather a solution for many cases where permanent marriage is not possible or feasible. The ambition is always to have permanent stability and never end any relationship. But real life dictates many less than ideal situations in which Allah has sanctioned solutions for them. Another important issue is that temporary marriage, just like permanent marriage, is not there to be used for excess or sampling around, because that would then constitute israf or wastage, which is forbidden in Islam. For example, even though it is permissible, it is undesirable to consummate a mut'ah marriage if it is conducted with a virgin girl, specifically if the couple have no intentions of permanency and no intention to convert that marriage into a permanent one. Mut'ah is a solution for many situations where permanent marriage is made difficult by different factors in life. We will go through some examples of the possible applications of mut'ah marriage. It could be used by the youth who are unable to marry permanently, either as a temporary solution or in the hope to convert it into permanent marriage in the future. It could be used as a solution to shield oneself against sin in situations where a man, for whatever reason, is unable to find a suitable permanent wife. He can contract temporary marriages with divorcees or widows who do not want permanent marriage. He can also marry in mut'ah any female who would otherwise fornicate in order to save her from fornication. It could be used by those unable to afford the costs of running a whole new household and or the nafaqah of the wife until they can afford to convert their marriage into a permanent one. It could be used for missionary purposes to invite women to religion, as it would allow you to be in contact with them and freely have dialogue with them without the fear of potential sin. It could be used as an alternative for the typical marriage engagements which usually take place without any marital contracts. In the case of having a temporary contract, the couple can get to know each other without the fear of falling into sin, which is often the case in the conventional engagements. It could be used as an option for polygyny for those who are unable to have two permanent marriages for whatever reason, including financial stress. It could be used in travel for convenience if one is forced to mix with the opposite gender for long periods of time or to share an accommodation. It could be used for prohibition, tahrim. A short-term marriage can be conducted without having any physical contact for the mere purpose of making the parent of the spouse into a mahram. This is a much better and more logical solution for prohibition than the infamous breastfeeding the adult fatwa adopted by the Sunni schools of thought.